Joining us right now is former UN Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Well, glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, the last week's events in Egypt have really been stunning, and what a quick turn of events it was leading up to our Independence Day, where the military basically deposed President Morsi, and now they put in place members of the judiciary branch of government there in Egypt. But this is a very, very difficult situation for the American government to deal with, because by all intents and purposes, this was a military coup, definitionally. But if we actually acknowledge that it was a military coup, then this calls into question all of the funding we are giving to the Egyptian military. This is a diplomatic morass, isn't it, Ambassador Bolton? What are we to do?
Well, it's certainly politically complicated inside Egypt, and it's unfortunately our assessment of the situation isn't being helped by a lot of simple-minded things some American politicians are saying. So let's start with what the basic point has to be. What is the United States' interest here? And the United States' interest is keeping the Camp David Accord with Israel intact and enforced on the Egyptian side. Number two, keeping the Suez Canal open because of its critical importance to international commerce. And three, trying to get the government of Egypt, whoever's in control, to have some basic respect for human rights. And so if you look at it in that order, you can see that second-guessing the political specifics inside Egypt really is not the centerpiece of American interest. That's why I favor continuing military assistance to Egypt, because the military at this point is the only institution that can provide some measure of stability and keep Egypt's international obligations. That doesn't say that it's a pretty picture. It just says that's what's in our interest.
All right, Ambassador Bolton, I'm reading between the lines here, and I want to draw you out a little bit, because based on how you just prioritized American interests there, and you described some of the political response here as simple-minded, it was Senator John McCain who made a point of going out and saying, listen, this was a military coup. Was Senator McCain wrong in doing that? Is that undermining our interests?
Yeah, Senator McCain wasn't who I had in mind. I had others in mind, but
name names then.
On this one, I disagree with Senator McCain respectfully. It is, in fact, contradicts his own earlier analysis that indeed it is the military that we have given over $70 billion to since the Camp David Accord. The fact is that democracy is more than just counting votes after an election. The Muslim Brotherhood, President Morsi and their parliamentary candidates won a free and fair election last year. That's true. But in the years since then, they have single-mindedly pursued an effort to create an Islamist state, amending the Constitution, trying to pack the judiciary, all with a view in mind to perpetuating themselves in power. So my judgment is the Brotherhood was already in the process of conducting a creeping coup, very anti-democratic and certainly anti-liberty. And that's one of the reasons why the military saw that if it didn't act, not only would the Egyptian economy continue into the tank, which is where the Morsi government allowed it to fall, but there wouldn't be another election for the people of Egypt to judge whether they like the Brotherhood's performance in office or not.
Well, okay, but the law seems to be sort of clear.
The law can be changed. The law can be changed.
Yeah, you think that's what needs to happen?
The president should say, look, I don't agree with this, the interpretation some have put on this law. I think there's executive authority to act. But in any event, the interest of the United States argue in favor of continuing assistance to the military, and if there's ambiguity about the law, let's clarify the law. Now, there's one other interesting point here. We are coming up to the end of our fiscal year on September the 30th. It's not at all clear to me how much aid remains to be dispersed this year, given the administration waived a lot of other requirements a few months ago to give aid to the Morsi government. So this may be a kind of arid debate. But in any event, the issue is not some technicality about a provision in the law that doesn't give the president a waiver. The question is, what should the United States do? And I think if we need clarification, fix the technicality, provide the assistance.
All right. So another thing, you know as a diplomat that optics, the way things look, are sometimes very, very important. And we had this incident where the Secretary of State was not in the picture at the White House briefing room when they were dealing with this. And when we ask about where he was, we come to find out that at least part of the time that he was not in the White House briefing room, he was on his yacht, something that the State Department repeatedly denied until they were shown a picture of him on his yacht. How does this play out? I mean, is it a lot of nothing, or does those optics have meaning?
Well, look, to be fair to Secretary Kerry, maybe it was easy to get President Obama on the golf course from the yacht than if he'd been trying to get him from his office. I mean, the administration as a whole has been absent without leave on Egypt policy, on foreign policy generally for a long time. And I understand electronic communications allow people to be involved even at a distance, but I tell you, there's nothing like the physical proximity. Number one, firing your own troops up in the State Department to make sure they're there 24/7, and having the personal connection, meeting in the Situation Room, electronic communications, including video conferencing, are great. There's nothing like face-to-face meetings, and it shows both determination and interest in the problem that being physically absent from Washington on vacation doesn't show.
Ambassador John Bolton is our guest. Of course, he's a former UN ambassador. And Ambassador Bolton, you have made no bones about your distaste for what Edward Snowden has done in revealing NSA policies. He is now a man without a country. He is still at the airport there in Moscow. Venezuela, it looks like, has offered asylum. What do you think the next move should be for the United States government in this very interesting international case?
Well, I think our objective should be to get Snowden back in the United States and prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. And not only that, but to get whatever information he's got out of his hands before he releases any more of it. I mean, I think it's been clear for a long time that there was an anti-American animus in Snowden's activities. I still wonder whether he didn't have help even before he fled to Hong Kong. A lot of what he's been doing shows that somebody else has been talking to them about what their priorities are. For example, revealing that the United States, heaven forbid, was spying on the European Union. You know, most Americans would say, great, who else are we spying on?
Yeah.
It's the Europeans that are upset by that. Now, what American would think, I got to get those Europeans on my side? I think that's evidence of WikiLeaks involvement and perhaps others who do hold a fundamentally anti-American point of view. And if Snowden ends up in Venezuela for the rest of his life, he'll deserve it.
All right, Ambassador Bolton, thanks for joining us. It is ironic, though, considering President Obama was hailed by Europe as the second coming because he was going to stop all those Bush-era policies.
Yeah, that's right.
Listen, when the Bush administration's finally over, you'll see.
Thank you, Ambassador Bolton, for joining us. As